Welcome to our channel. Today, we have a gripping story for you titled, Shattered Vows. A cheating wife's journey to redemption. Join us as we dive into the complex world of Brian and Rachel, a couple whose seemingly perfect marriage is put to the ultimate test. After Rachel's return from a business trip, Brian's keen intuition picks up on subtle changes in her behavior. The coldness and distance he feels lead to a heartbreaking confession: Rachel's brief affair with her boss, Mr. Cooper. In this emotional tale, you'll witness their struggle to navigate through betrayal, rebuild trust, and find a path to forgiveness. With the help of Dr. Turner, a renowned marriage counselor, Brian and Rachel embark on a journey to understand the underlying fractures in their relationship and fight for their love. Stay tuned as we unravel this compelling story of heartbreak, healing, and the enduring power of love. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any updates on Shattered Vows. A cheating wife's journey to redemption. Brian had always prided himself on his intuition, a seemingly innate ability to read between the lines, whether poring over complex financial reports at work or navigating the subtleties of his marriage. However, nothing could have prepared him for the gnawing suspicion that began to take root in his mind after Rachel returned from her latest business trip in the summer of 2023. The change in her was subtle at first: an averted gaze during dinner, a hesitant pause in conversation, and laughter that didn't quite reach her eyes. They had been married for over a decade, weathering both personal storms and professional triumphs side by side. Yet, as the days passed since her return, a chilling distance seemed to spread between them, like the slow creep of frost over the windows of their once warm home. It was a Thursday evening, and they were sitting across from each other at their favorite French restaurant, a place that had witnessed countless celebrations and quiet moments of connection throughout their marriage. Brian watched as Rachel pushed her food around her plate, her focus elsewhere. She looked up, catching his gaze, and forced a smile. "Is everything okay?" Brian asked, the concern evident in his voice. His fork hovered midway to his mouth, his appetite forgotten. Rachel nodded, a bit too quickly. "Yes, of course. Just tired from the trip, that's all." But Brian knew better. Rachel was an excellent communicator, one of the traits that had drawn him to her when they first met at a mutual friend's art exhibition. She had always been vivacious, her energy infectious. Now, she seemed withdrawn, her spark dimmed. As they drove home, the silence in the car was stifling. Brian wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap with his hand or his words, but uncertainty held him back. The image of her at the company beach party a week earlier flashed through his mind. How she had laughed a little too loudly at Mr. Cooper's jokes, her body angled towards him in a way that now seemed laden with meaning. That night, as Rachel went straight to the bathroom to prepare for bed, Brian sat on the edge of their bed, his mind racing. The more he thought about it, the more pieces seemed to fall into place, forming a picture he desperately wished to deny. He remembered the late-night calls she said were from a stressed coworker, the sudden weekend meetings, and now, her evasiveness. He was still sitting there when Rachel emerged from the bathroom, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, her defenselessness in that moment tugging at his heart. Yet, the seed of doubt had been planted, and with it, the fear of what it might grow into. "Rachel," he began, his voice a mixture of dread and hope, "is there something we need to talk about? Something you want to tell me?" She paused at the bathroom door, her hand on the knob tightening. Her back was to him, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she turned to face him, her expression inscrutable in the dim light. "Brian, she started, then faltered. "I don't know where to begin." "Start with the truth," Brian replied softly, the weight of his words hanging between them. The air felt thick as Rachel took a deep breath. Her next words would set the course of their marriage in a direction Brian was uncertain he was prepared to follow. But he knew they had to face whatever was coming together, for better or worse. Rachel walked slowly from the door to the edge of their bed, her silhouette ghostly in the moonlight filtering through the blinds. She sat down, not quite facing Brian, her posture tense, as if bracing for impact. "Brian, I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the air conditioning. Brian felt his heart tighten. a mix of dread and a desperate wish for her next words to undo the knot of suspicion in his stomach. What happened, Rachel? It was the last night of the conference, Rachel began, her words halting, painful. We went out for drinks, the whole team. I had too much to drink, and I wasn't thinking clearly. It's not an excuse, just what happened. Brian's hands clenched into fists, the bedsheets crumpling under his grip. Go on, he urged, his voice strained. Rachel paused, taking a shaky breath. My boss, Mr. Cooper, was there. We all were having fun, or at least it seemed like it. I felt overwhelmed, stressed from the week. I took some propranolol earlier that day for my anxiety. Between that and the alcohol, I wasn't myself. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Brian's mind raced, images of betrayal slicing through his thoughts, each more painful than the last. Rachel, did something happen with your boss? Brian's voice was a mix of hope and fear, begging for a denial. Yes, she admitted, her voice breaking. We ended up back in my hotel room. It was a brief moment, but it happened. I'm so sorry, Brian. It was a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake. The room spun around Brian as he processed her confession. The betrayal felt personal, deep. It wasn't just the act itself but the trust shattered, the future they had envisioned together now tainted. Why didn't you tell me right away? His voice was low, each word laced with pain. I was scared, Rachel replied, her voice small. Scared of losing you, of changing everything we have. I thought maybe it could just be forgotten, a terrible decision lost to time. Brian stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the night. The quiet streets belied the turmoil inside him. He needed to understand, to see the full picture before he could even think of forgiveness. Rachel, was this really just a one-time thing? Or is there more you haven't told me? It was just that once. I swear, Brian. It meant nothing. He means nothing. I was confused, and I made a choice that I regret more than anything. Brian turned to look at her, searching her face for the sincerity in her apology, the truth in her eyes. He saw regret, yes, but could he see honesty? Was remorse enough to rebuild on? And what now, Rachel? Brian's voice was heavy with the weight of their shared history, their love, now cracked at its foundation. How do we move forward from this? Rachel reached out a hand, but Brian didn't move to take it. I will do whatever it takes to fix this, Brian. I want to make this right. I want to earn your trust again. Please, tell me there's a way. Brian sighed, the sound filled with sorrow and love, a paradox fitting for his feelings at the moment. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, perhaps insurmountable ones. But as he looked at Rachel, his partner for over a decade, he wondered if the foundation they built together was strong enough to hold, or if the crack had run too deep. Let's start with honesty, he finally said. Complete transparency. We need to go into therapy, both individually and together. It's going to take time, Rachel. A lot of time and effort. Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face, her relief palpable yet tempered by the uncertainty of the future. Whatever it takes, she echoed, her commitment clear even amidst the ruins of their trust. As they sat there, the night drawing on, the silence between them spoke of a long journey ahead, one filled with potential for healing or the pain of parting ways. The dawn was yet to come, and with it, the first test of their resolve to mend what had been broken. The following morning was heavy with unspoken words. Brian and Rachel moved through their morning routine like actors on a stage, each action practiced but devoid of genuine emotion. Brian's mind was still reeling from Rachel's confession the night before, the shock of her words echoing in his thoughts. He had hardly slept, his mind racing with questions and doubts. As Brian sat at the breakfast table, staring blankly at his untouched plate of scrambled eggs, Rachel joined him, her face pale and drawn. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. Brian looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of their situation pressing down on them both. We need to talk, Brian finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but underneath it lay a sea of turmoil. Rachel nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I know. I'm so sorry, Brian. I never meant for this to happen. I don't even know how to begin to make it right. Brian sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know either, Rachel. But we can't just ignore this. We need to figure out a way forward, or we won't have a future. Rachel reached out to touch his hand, but Brian pulled back instinctively. The hurt in her eyes was evident, but Brian couldn't bring himself to offer comfort. Not yet. Let's start by being completely honest with each other, Brian said. No more secrets, no more lies. We need to rebuild trust, and that starts with transparency. Rachel nodded again, wiping away a tear. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes, Brian. I love you, and I want to make this work. They agreed to seek professional help, and later that day, Rachel made an appointment with Dr. Turner, a highly recommended marriage counselor known for her expertise in dealing with infidelity and relationship issues. The first session was scheduled for the following week, giving them a few days to prepare themselves mentally for the road ahead. In the meantime, Brian couldn't help but replay the events leading up to Rachel's confession. He remembered the nights she had come home late, the excuse of work meetings and deadlines. The way she had seemed distant, preoccupied, even when they were together. All of it now made sense, but it also left him feeling betrayed and angry. He tried to focus on work, burying himself in financial reports and spreadsheets, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Rachel. How could she do this to him? To them? Their marriage had been strong, or so he thought. They had faced challenges before, but this was different. This was a breach of trust so deep that Brian wasn't sure it could ever be fully repaired. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, the atmosphere was tense. The silence between them was palpable, filled with the unspoken pain and uncertainty of their future. Brian watched Rachel as she picked at her food, her eyes downcast. He wanted to reach out, to hold her and tell her that everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. Brian, Rachel said softly, breaking the silence. I know you're hurting, and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. I'll do whatever it takes. Brian looked at her, his heart aching. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the remorse etched on her face. But the hurt was still too fresh, too raw. It's going to take time, Rachel, Brian said, his voice heavy with emotion. I don't know if I can forgive you right now. But I'm willing to try. For us. Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. That's all I can ask for. Thank you, Brian. The days leading up to their first counseling session were fraught with tension. Brian and Rachel avoided discussing the affair directly, focusing instead on their day-to-day routines and responsibilities. But the underlying tension was always there, a constant reminder of the fragility of their relationship. When the day of their first session with Dr. Turner finally arrived, Brian felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. He knew that this was a crucial step in their journey towards healing, but he also feared what might come out during their sessions. Rachel seemed equally nervous, her hands trembling slightly as they walked into Dr. Turner's office. Dr. Turner greeted them warmly, her demeanor calm and reassuring. She led them into her office, a cozy room filled with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. As they sat down, Brian took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Thank you for coming, Dr. Turner began. I know this isn't easy, but it's a crucial step towards healing and rebuilding your relationship. Before we begin, I want to establish that this is a safe space. You can speak freely here, without fear of judgment. My role is to help you navigate through this difficult time and find a path forward. Brian and Rachel both nodded, their expressions tense but determined. Let's start by discussing what brought you here, Dr. Turner said, turning to Rachel. Rachel, can you tell me about the events that led to this moment? Rachel took a deep breath, her voice shaky as she began to speak. It was during my last business trip. We had a team outing on the last night, and I drank too much. My boss, Mr. Cooper, was there. One thing led to another, and we ended up in my hotel room. It was a brief moment, but it happened. I deeply regret it, and I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused. Dr. Turner nodded, her expression empathetic. Thank you for sharing, Rachel. It's important to acknowledge what happened and take responsibility for your actions. Brian, how did you feel when Rachel told you about the affair? Brian's voice was tight as he replied. I felt betrayed, angry, hurt. Our marriage was built on trust, and that trust has been shattered. I don't know how to move past this. Dr. Turner leaned forward slightly, her eyes gentle. Your feelings are completely valid, Brian. Infidelity is a profound breach of trust, and it's natural to feel the way you do. The road to healing will be long and challenging, but it's not impossible. The first step is to establish open and honest communication between you two. The session continued with Dr. Turner guiding them through a series of exercises designed to help them express their feelings and begin to rebuild their trust. She encouraged them to share their thoughts and emotions openly, without fear of judgment or retaliation. It was a difficult process, but both Brian and Rachel were committed to making it work. As they left Dr. Turner's office, Brian felt a glimmer of hope. The session had been challenging, but it was a step in the right direction. He knew that the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but he also knew that he wasn't alone. Rachel was by his side, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. That night, as they lay in bed, Brian reached out and took Rachel's hand. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Rachel squeezed his hand in return, her eyes filled with tears. We're going to get through this, Brian said softly. One step at a time. Rachel nodded, her voice choked with emotion. Together. The weeks that followed their initial counseling session were a testament to the complexities of forgiveness and the arduous path of reconciliation. Brian and Rachel, once inseparable, now navigated the delicate dance of rebuilding trust. Each day brought its own challenges, a constant push and pull between past hurts and future hopes. Brian had insisted on transparency, and Rachel adhered without hesitation. She gave him access to her phone, her emails, and her schedule. She recounted conversations and encounters in painstaking detail, leaving nothing in the shadows. Yet, even with her openness, Brian often found himself wrestling with shadows of doubt that crept into his thoughts during quiet moments. They started seeing Dr. Turner twice a week. The sessions were initially stiff, fraught with tension and unspoken accusations. Dr. Turner guided them gently but firmly, pushing them to confront not just the affair, but the underlying fractures in their relationship that had perhaps made them vulnerable to such a cataclysm. It's not just about the incident itself, Dr. Turner would say, her voice calm and steady. It's about understanding what led there, the unmet needs, the unspoken fears, and how you both can move forward from this with understanding and empathy. Rachel was committed. She participated in the sessions with a level of earnestness that both surprised and reassured Brian. She delved into her own insecurities and failings, her voice often quivering with emotion as she spoke of her fear of inadequacy in their marriage and her career. Brian, for his part, struggled with his emotions. Anger, betrayal, and hurt layered over his love for Rachel, creating a tumultuous mix that he found difficult to manage. Dr. Turner encouraged him to express these emotions, to confront them rather than let them fester in silence. In order to heal, you need to feel, Dr. Turner advised during one session, her gaze locked on Brian's. Ignoring your pain won't make it go away, Brian. Acknowledging it is the first step towards truly moving past it. As the weeks turned into months, there were small victories. A shared laugh over dinner that didn't end in silence. A night where Brian reached out to hold Rachel's hand, his grip tentative but firm. Slowly, the good days began to outnumber the bad ones. One evening, they walked through the park where Brian had proposed years ago. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the autumn leaves. They found their old bench, the one with their initials carved discreetly in the corner. Brian looked over at Rachel, her hair catching the golden light. Do you remember this place? He asked, his voice soft. Rachel smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. How could I forget? This is where it all started. Brian took a deep breath, the air crisp and tinged with the scent of fallen leaves. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he started, his voice steady. About us, about everything we've been through. Rachel turned to face him, her expression attentive. And I think we're going to make it, Brian said, the words feeling foreign yet right as they left his lips. Not because it's easy, but because we're both working for it. I see how hard you're trying, Rachel. And I know I've been trying too. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out to touch his face. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused, she whispered. Thank you for giving us this chance. Brian leaned into her touch, closing his eyes for a moment. Let's keep moving forward, he said. Together. As they sat there, hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, a sense of cautious optimism enveloped them. The road ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly difficult, but they faced it together, a united front ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. In this shared moment, they found a renewed commitment to their journey. A journey not back to where they were but forward to something new, something stronger. Months had passed since Rachel's confession, and with each passing day, the frost that had once threatened to permanently encase their relationship slowly melted away. Brian and Rachel had gradually rekindled the warmth that once defined their marriage, though the scars remained, subtle reminders of the tumult they had weathered together. Brian had come to realize that forgiveness was not a singular act, but a continuous process. It required daily commitment, not just from Rachel but from himself as well. He had learned to communicate his insecurities openly, sharing his fears without letting them consume him, thanks to the strategies they developed with Dr. Turner. Rachel, in turn, had become more introspective, understanding more deeply the consequences of her actions and striving to fortify their bond. The couple had started a new tradition. Friday night was now date night, a sacred time to reconnect and share moments of joy. It was during one of these evenings, at a quaint cafe downtown where jazz music softly played in the background, that Rachel suggested a new adventure. Brian, I've been thinking, Rachel began, her eyes reflecting the soft candlelight on their table. We've been through so much, and we've fought hard to rebuild. What do you think about renewing our vows? A fresh start, in a way. Brian paused, considering her words. The idea of renewing their vows hadn't crossed his mind, but now it sparked a sense of renewal, a symbolic way to leave the past behind and forge a new path forward. I think that's a wonderful idea, he replied, his voice filled with a hopeful enthusiasm that had been absent for too long. Plans for the vow renewal ceremony brought a new energy to their lives. They chose a small chapel by the sea, a place neither of them had been before but which held the promise of new memories. They invited only their closest family and friends, those who had supported them through their darkest times. On the day of the ceremony, the sun cast a golden glow over the sea, the waves gently applauding against the shore. Rachel looked radiant in a simple white dress, a garland of wildflowers in her hair. Brian, dressed in a classic navy suit, took her hands in his as they stood before the officiant. Rachel, when I first met you, I knew my life was about to change, Brian began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. These past months have tested us more than I ever imagined possible. But here we are, standing together, more united than ever. Today, I recommit myself to you, to us, to a future we will shape together, no matter the storms we may face. Rachel's vows were equally heartfelt. Brian, you are my rock, my heart. The road here hasn't been easy, and I know the journey ahead may have its challenges. But I promise to walk it with you, hand in hand, with honesty, love, and unwavering support. Today, I renew not only my vows but my commitment to being the partner you deserve. As they exchanged rings, a symbol of their renewed commitment, there was a palpable sense of healing that enveloped them. It was not just a renewal of vows but a celebration of resilience, of a love that had been tested and had endured. The reception was filled with laughter and dancing, a stark contrast to the somber months that had preceded it. It was as if they were truly starting anew, allowing themselves to fully enjoy the presence of each other and their loved ones. As the evening drew to a close, Brian and Rachel walked along the shoreline, the fading light casting long shadows on the sand. They watched the horizon, where the sun met the sea in a perfect line, a symbol of endless possibilities. We did it, Rachel, Brian said, squeezing her hand. We did, Rachel replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. And we'll keep doing it, every day. As they stood together, the ocean's melody a soothing background, they knew that while the future was uncertain, their commitment to each other was clear and unwavering. They had not just turned back the clock to a time before the pain but had moved forward, stronger and more in love than ever, ready to face whatever lay ahead. In the weeks following their vow renewal, Brian and Rachel's commitment to their relationship was tested in new and unexpected ways. They had begun to find a rhythm in their lives again, but the journey to complete healing was far from over. One afternoon, Brian was at work, immersed in a financial report, when his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. It was a simple text, but it sent a wave of anxiety through him. "Can we talk tonight? Something important," it read. Brian's heart skipped a beat. Despite their progress, the fear of what something important might mean loomed large. He texted back a quick, reassuring reply, then spent the rest of the day distracted, his thoughts drifting back to Rachel and what she might want to discuss. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Brian could sense Rachel's tension. He decided to wait until they were finished eating before bringing up her message. The silence between them was thick, but Brian focused on maintaining a calm demeanor. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Rachel sat down on the couch, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. Brian sat beside her, taking a deep breath. "Rachel, you wanted to talk about something?" he asked gently. Rachel nodded, her eyes avoiding his. "Yes, it's about work. I found out today that Mr. Cooper is being promoted. He'll be moving to a different branch, but it means he'll still be in contact with our office for a while. I wanted to tell you because I didn't want to keep anything from you." Brian felt a surge of mixed emotions. Relief that it wasn't something more personal, but also renewed anxiety about Mr. Cooper's presence in their lives. He appreciated Rachel's honesty, but the news still unsettled him. "Thank you for telling me," Brian said, his voice steady. "How do you feel about it?" Rachel sighed, finally meeting his gaze. "I'm nervous, to be honest. I don't want anything to disrupt the progress we've made. But I also don't want to let fear control my actions. I want to handle this with integrity and transparency." Brian reached out, taking her hand in his. "We'll get through this together. Just keep being honest with me, and we'll find a way to navigate this." Rachel squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I will, Brian. I promise." Over the next few weeks, Rachel's workplace situation added an extra layer of complexity to their lives. She kept Brian informed about her interactions with Mr. Cooper, which were kept strictly professional. Still, the underlying tension was always present, a reminder of the fragility of their renewed trust. To help manage the stress, Brian and Rachel continued their therapy sessions with Dr. Turner. The counselor provided them with strategies to cope with the additional pressure, emphasizing the importance of open communication and mutual support. "Trust is like a fragile vase," Dr. Turner explained during one session. "It can be repaired after being broken, but it will always bear the cracks. The key is to handle it with care and respect, ensuring those cracks don't lead to further damage." Brian and Rachel took this advice to heart, working diligently to maintain the transparency they had established. They also found solace in small moments of connection, morning coffee together, evening walks, and weekend getaways. These shared experiences helped to strengthen their bond, reminding them of the love that had brought them together in the first place. One weekend, they decided to take a trip to the mountains, a place they had visited early in their relationship. The crisp air and scenic views provided a perfect backdrop for reflection and reconnection. They spent their days hiking and exploring, their evenings by the fire, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. One night, as they sat by the fire pit, Rachel turned to Brian, her expression thoughtful. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" she asked, her voice soft. Brian smiled, nodding. "Of course. It was right after our first anniversary. We were so carefree and full of plans." Rachel sighed, her gaze drifting to the flickering flames. "I miss that feeling sometimes. But I also realize that our journey, with all its ups and downs, has made us stronger. We're not the same people we were back then, and that's okay." Brian reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We've grown, Rachel, and we've faced challenges that would have broken many others. But we're still here, still fighting for each other. That's what matters." Rachel leaned into his touch, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love you, Brian. More than words can express." "I love you too," Brian replied, his voice filled with emotion. And I believe in us. Their weekend in the mountains was a turning point. It reminded them of the depth of their connection and the strength of their commitment. They returned home with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Back in the routine of daily life, Brian and Rachel continued to work on their relationship. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, but they had learned to address these feelings openly. Their Friday date nights remained a sacred tradition, providing a regular opportunity to reconnect and enjoy each other's company. One Friday evening, as they enjoyed dinner at a new restaurant in town, Brian looked across the table at Rachel and felt a surge of love and gratitude. They had come so far from the painful night of her confession, and while the journey was ongoing, he felt hopeful about their future. "Rachel," he said, reaching for her hand, "I just want to say how proud I am of us. We've faced some incredibly tough times, but we've never given up on each other. That means everything to me." Rachel smiled, her eyes bright with affection. "It means everything to me too, Brian. And I'm grateful for every moment we've shared, even the difficult ones. They've brought us to where we are now." As they enjoyed their meal, they talked about their plans for the future. They discussed taking a long-awaited trip to Europe, something they had dreamed about for years. They also talked about their professional goals and personal aspirations, finding joy in imagining the life they were building together. That night, as they walked home hand in hand, Brian felt a sense of peace. He knew that their relationship would never be perfect, but he also knew that perfection wasn't the goal. What mattered was their dedication to each other and their willingness to face life's challenges together. In the months that followed, Brian and Rachel continued to grow stronger as a couple. Their love, tested by adversity, had deepened and matured. They had learned that true commitment wasn't about never facing difficulties, but about standing by each other through them all. They remained committed to their therapy sessions, using them as a tool to navigate any new challenges that arose. Dr. Turner continued to provide valuable insights and guidance, helping them to maintain the healthy communication habits they had developed. One particularly challenging day, Rachel received an email from Mr. Cooper, asking for her input on a project he was managing at his new branch. The request was professional, but it stirred up old anxieties. Rachel showed the email to Brian, wanting to be transparent. "I don't know how to respond," Rachel admitted, her voice shaky. Brian read the email, then looked at Rachel. "It's okay to feel anxious, but remember, you have the right to set boundaries. If you feel uncomfortable, it's okay to express that." Rachel nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. I'll respond professionally, but I'll also make it clear that I prefer to keep interactions limited." Brian smiled, proud of her strength. "I know you can handle this. And I'm here for you, every step of the way." Rachel crafted a polite but firm response, setting boundaries while maintaining a professional tone. Brian's support gave her the confidence she needed to handle the situation, and the incident became another example of how they had grown as a couple. As the year progressed, Brian and Rachel continued to build their future together. They planned their trip to Europe, booked their flights, and excitedly discussed the places they wanted to visit. They also continued to nurture their relationship, finding joy in the everyday moments that made up their life together. One evening, as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset, Rachel turned to Brian with a thoughtful expression. "Brian, do you ever think about how far we've come?" Brian nodded, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "I do. And I'm grateful for every step of our journey. It's made us who we are." Rachel smiled, her heart full. "I wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge, every triumph, it's all been worth it." Brian took her hand, squeezing it gently. "And there's so much more ahead of us. I'm excited for our future, Rachel. Together, we can face anything." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Brian and Rachel sat in comfortable silence, content in the knowledge that their love had endured. They had faced their darkest moments and emerged stronger, more united than ever. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever came next, confident in their love and commitment to each other. The path to healing had been long and difficult, but it had also brought them closer than ever, forging a bond that nothing could break. The arrival of spring brought with it a renewed sense of optimism for Brian and Rachel. Their journey through the tumultuous waters of reconciliation had brought them closer, but it also highlighted the need for continued growth and new beginnings. With their upcoming trip to Europe just a few months away, they decided to embrace this fresh start wholeheartedly. One sunny Saturday morning, Brian suggested they visit a nearby farmer's market, a favorite spot from their early days of marriage. As they strolled through the bustling stalls, the vibrant colors and lively atmosphere seemed to reflect their rejuvenated spirits. They sampled fresh fruits, admired handmade crafts, and chatted with local vendors, relishing the simplicity of the moment. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" Rachel asked, a nostalgic smile playing on her lips. Brian nodded, his eyes twinkling. "How could I forget? You were so excited about the lavender honey, and we ended up buying 3 jars. Rachel laughed, the sound light and carefree. "And we used them all within a month. Those were good times." "They still are," Brian said, taking her hand. "And we're making even more good memories now." Their day at the market ended with a picnic in the nearby park, where they sat under the shade of a large oak tree, enjoying the delicious treats they had purchased. As they talked about their plans for the future, Brian felt a sense of contentment wash over him. They had come a long way, and he was proud of the progress they had made. In the weeks that followed, they continued to focus on nurturing their relationship. They attended their therapy sessions with Dr. Turner, who noted their progress and encouraged them to keep up their efforts. The sessions were now more about maintaining the healthy communication habits they had developed and less about addressing past grievances. Dr. Turner introduced them to new exercises designed to strengthen their emotional connection. One of these exercises involved writing letters to each other, expressing their gratitude and appreciation for the other's efforts. The letters were meant to be read aloud during their sessions, fostering an environment of positive reinforcement and mutual support. On the evening before their next session, Brian sat down at his desk, reflecting on the past few months. He picked up his pen and began to write. "Dear Rachel, as I sit here reflecting on our journey, I am filled with gratitude for the strength and resilience you have shown. Our path has not been easy, but your commitment to our relationship has been unwavering. I want to thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and your willingness to face our challenges head-on. You have shown me what true partnership looks like, and I am incredibly proud of the progress we have made together. Your love and support have been my anchor, and I am more confident than ever in our future. Thank you for standing by me, for believing in us, and for making me believe in us too. I love you more than words can express, and I am excited for all the new memories we will create together. With all my love, Brian. Brian folded the letter carefully, placing it in an envelope. The next day, as they sat in Dr. Turner's office, he read the letter aloud, his voice filled with emotion. Rachel's eyes glistened with tears as she listened, her heart swelling with love and appreciation. When it was her turn, Rachel took out her own letter, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath and began to read. Dear Brian, these past months have been the most challenging of my life, but also the most transformative. Your strength, patience, and unwavering support have been my guiding light. I am grateful for your forgiveness, for your willingness to rebuild our trust, and for the love you have continued to show me. You have taught me the true meaning of commitment, and I am inspired by your dedication to our relationship. Every day, I am reminded of why I fell in love with you, and my love for you has only grown deeper. Thank you for believing in us, for standing by me, and for giving us a second chance. I am excited for our future, and I promise to continue working on being the best partner I can be. With all my heart, Rachel. As Rachel finished reading, Brian reached out to wipe away her tears, his own eyes misty with emotion. Dr. Turner smiled warmly, pleased with their progress. These letters are a beautiful testament to your commitment and growth, she said. Keep nurturing this connection, and remember to celebrate each other and the love you share. With Dr. Turner's guidance, Brian and Rachel continued to strengthen their relationship. They made a conscious effort to support each other's personal and professional goals, celebrating each milestone together. Brian's promotion at work and Rachel's successful project completion were both reasons for celebration, and they marked these achievements with special date nights and thoughtful gestures. As their trip to Europe approached, the excitement built. They planned their itinerary meticulously, choosing destinations that held both historical significance and personal interest. From the romantic streets of Paris to the picturesque canals of Venice, they looked forward to creating new memories together. Their first stop was Paris, the city of love. As they strolled along the Seine River, hand in hand, Brian felt a deep sense of contentment. The beauty of the city, coupled with the love and connection he felt with Rachel, made for a perfect beginning to their adventure. One evening, they visited the Eiffel Tower, watching as the city lights twinkled below. Brian turned to Rachel, his heart full. "This is perfect," he said softly. "Thank you for sharing this with me." Rachel smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for being here with me. I wouldn't want to experience this with anyone else." From Paris, they traveled to the charming city of Florence, where they marveled at Renaissance art and architecture. They explored the Uffizi Gallery, stood in awe before Michelangelo's David, and savored delicious Italian cuisine. Each day brought new discoveries and deeper connections. In Venice, they glided through the canals on a gondola, the gentle sway of the boat and the serene beauty of the city creating an unforgettable experience. As they navigated the narrow waterways, Brian and Rachel reflected on their journey, appreciating the resilience of their love. The trip was everything they had hoped for and more. It was a celebration of their love, a testament to their growth, and a reminder of the strength of their bond. As they returned home, they felt rejuvenated, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Back in their daily routine, Brian and Rachel continued to prioritize their relationship. They maintained their date nights, attended therapy sessions, and supported each other's endeavors. Their journey was ongoing, but they were committed to facing it together, confident in their love and the strength of their partnership. One evening, as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset, Brian turned to Rachel with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. Rachel nodded, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "I do, and I'm grateful for every step of our journey. It's made us who we are." Brian smiled, his heart full. "I wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge, every triumph, it's all been worth it." Rachel took his hand, squeezing it gently. "And there's so much more ahead of us. I'm excited for our future, Brian. Together, we can face anything." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Brian and Rachel sat in comfortable silence, content in the knowledge that their love had endured. They had faced their darkest moments and emerged stronger, more united than ever. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever came next, confident in their love and commitment to each other. The path to healing had been long and difficult, but it had also brought them closer than ever, forging a bond that nothing could break. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through Shattered Vows, a cheating wife's journey to redemption. As we've seen, Brian and Rachel's story is one of resilience and transformation. Despite the immense pain caused by Rachel's betrayal, their commitment to each other and their willingness to confront their issues head-on with the help of Dr. Turner has brought them closer than ever. Their story is a powerful reminder that love, honesty, and hard work can overcome even the deepest wounds. Brian and Rachel's renewed vows and their subsequent journey to Europe symbolize a fresh start, a new chapter in their lives filled with hope and new memories. Their ongoing efforts to maintain their relationship and support each other show that true commitment is an ongoing process, not just a one-time decision. We hope their story has inspired you and given you a deeper understanding of the complexities of relationships and the power of forgiveness. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more compelling stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.